I think the big themes in science fiction are global. So things that American science fiction writers write about are the same things that Asian science fiction writers write about. Um, Sometimes in different ways, but I think the overall ideas that we're supposed to get from them are pretty similar.
I kind of like that. That's helpful and hopeful and that there's a global perspective.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole point of science fiction is to go beyond our world. So if we can't be united as a world, how are we ever going to get beyond it? Right?
Welcome, Lindas.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I'm Desiree, and I am joined by Jennifer and Sharon. And welcome to A Couple of Lindas, which is a show about, the lost art of conversation. I feel like people nowadays are so caught up in their phones and interacting with everything else except for the people that are sitting at the table with them. So I want to bring that back, which, podcasts have been a great tool for that in recent years, as well as kind of talking about some debunking myths of the South and what people think that people from the South are like. And it's usually wrong. But I am curious, just kind of get us started, tell me about your day, like your week, like what's something that's put a smile on your face?
The weather. Oh my God, the weather. It's been so lovely. Nothing makes me happier than a sunny fall day when it's not too hot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's finally fall now. It's been amazing to wear layers and the leaves are falling and, beer festival season that's coming up, all that good stuff. What about you, Sharon?
I have a couple of things that have made me happy this week. I got carded today.
Hey,
congratulations.
And I'm
That's awesome.
not young. My youngest daughter's old enough to drink, so I was happy. But I also found out today that there is a Sci-Fi original movie that's available for rent, and it's supposedly got the highest rating of any sci-fi movie this year, let alone being made for TV. So I can't wait to see that and show my class. I want to do that. So yeah, excited about that.
Cool. And anything else, or is that the two that you're happy about?
I mean, there's plenty more, but I don't want to take up the whole time.
Hey, look at you, happy with life and everything. What's been making me happy this week is I watched the Meyerowitz Stories movie that's on Netflix that just came out a little bit ago. That was written and directed by by Noah Baumbach. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He did Squid and the Whale and Frances Ha.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And so the movie is about, this father, this, aging father, and then there's these siblings that are from two different mothers. And so there's two siblings that are from the second wife and then another sibling that's from the third wife. And they're a little estranged. One lives out in LA. The rest of the family is in New York City. But it just kind of talks about the entanglements of just family life and dealing with aging parents and then dealing with your own sense of feeling of, okay, am I a failure? Am I a success? What is success? All that good stuff. I don't know. I love those kind of movies where, it makes you think, and it's not some just campy little romantic something.
Is that Dustin Hoffman?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I saw a little bit of that.
Ben Stiller,
described.
right?
Yeah, Ben Stiller,
I saw the
Adam
ad,
Sandler.
But it's Halloween, so I'm watching scary movies right now. I'll save that for November.
Yeah. But going back to the sci-fi topic, I wanted to talk to you all because I know, Sharon, you use sci-fi in your class. You teach lit or composition at a university. And I know that this is something that you've been very passionate about. And I know that, Jennifer, you're a big fan of sci-fi and all that good stuff. So I also wanted to have it actually be a conversation amongst women talking about sci-fi instead of just a bunch of dude bros. So I'm not I'm not well versed in sci-fi and science fiction, anything really. I don't know what my problem is. Because I think I've mentioned how a majority of my good friends are big into sci-fi and I just somehow have missed the boat. So if you could kind of give me a one-on-one, not, necessarily try to convince me, but kind of, of what is it that makes sci-fi stick out and so, fun to you?
Well, I'll get to that in a second, but I just remember the other night when we were talking about doing this and you said, "Oh, I'm not that much of a sci-fi fan." And we were talking about what is sci-fi. And I mentioned Black Mirror and you're like, "Oh, that's sci-fi." And I know that was sci-fi. And I think that part of the problem is people don't have a good definition of sci-fi because there are so many different kinds of sci-fi that they don't understand what can be considered sci-fi. And so a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't like sci-fi," because they think of one type, and it's more than that.
Yeah, I just kind of assume like, oh, it's aliens and stuff, right?
Yeah, and that's definitely one subgenre is aliens, but another is, artificial intelligence or robots or ecological nature versus technology kinds of questions. And what does it mean to be human? And lots of different things can fit into sci-fi or science fiction, fantasy. There's hard sci-fi, soft sci-fi. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, and I always kind of lumped, like, because I always said, like, the kind of movies that I do not like to watch are sci-fi, fantasy, and period films. Mm-hmm. And so I know you can't really lump together sci-fi and fantasy. They're two different genres, right?
Yes and no. I sort of feel like they're two different ones. And of course, you have, you're more well versed in this than me. I'm just a fangirl. But for me, the difference is that if I would refer to it as fantasy, there is an element of magic, kind of, whereas science fiction, as outrageous and as crazy as it can be, to me, there's always some element of it could possibly happen. Okay. So, and I like both. I like both things, and I like all kinds of stuff. But with the science fiction, it feels like there is some grounding in, an actual object or an actual process, something like that. So, yeah, could people evolve to be green and have chlorophyll in their skin? I mean, that's crazy, but it's a thing that somebody can imagine possibly evolving from reality. Okay. That's kind of the difference for me.
Yeah, they can be two different genres, but they can also overlap. And a lot of times nowadays, science fiction isn't even called science fiction. It's called speculative fiction.
What?
That's cool.
Because you're speculating on what could happen.
Oh.
And so fantasy can fall under that. Horror can fall under that. Anything supernatural can fall under that. So speculative fiction has sort of become the...
That's a much better
term. Nom de gore. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm using that term right or not.
Where did that term come from? Is that from an academic setting or just from the movie industry, film industry?
I honestly don't know the origins. I just know when I was setting up my classes, I was doing a lot of reading and I was looking up sci-fi on Google, and they were telling me, "Well, do you mean sci-fi or do you mean speculative fiction?" And it's like, well, both. I don't know. So, yeah.
See, that's why I love language, is that we are always, like, the assumption is that all words have already been discovered or, made up, but we're always adding to the language. I love that there's always a newer or better way to describe something.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of frustrating for me. I'm more of the science girl. I want to be able to solve for X and look up the answer and see if it's right. Okay. So when language changes, I feel very inadequate to try to keep up with it. I think, like, all this sort of social, verbiage that's changing is really hard for me to keep up with. I'm trying.
Yeah, that's a whole nother subject. And actually, side, Kathy actually kind of wants to talk about that, like all these new words, how a person is supposed to be expected to know these words. But okay, so in your classroom, like, how do you use science fiction?
I do it a couple of different ways. It depends on what class I'm teaching. Anytime I'm teaching a lit class, I just focus on the readings on horror and science fiction. I'm doing World Lit this year. It's the first time that I've had to go out and find short stories that are science fiction, because it's big. American science fiction and British science fiction are huge, but trying to find German science fiction or Russian science fiction is a little more difficult. Now it's getting a lot bigger in Asia, China, Japan. I can find Philippines, big. I can find all kinds of readings for them. I can find a lot of readings in Africa. But Central to Eastern Europe they're out there. They're just hard to find.
Okay.
And one of the problems I've had is there aren't any textbooks that are, because I teach my lit classes more as a comparative lit, where it's, I take North America, South America, Asia, Africa, and I try to get readings from all of them and compare them. And there aren't any books made that are anthologies of a bunch of science fiction from around the world, except for stuff from 1950.
Yeah.
And I want contemporary stuff. So I'm having to go out and find a lot of readings myself. And it's been frustrating because I can find science fiction, but then I have a hard time pinpointing where it came from, or I can find world literature from these areas, but then I have to read through it all to find out if it's science fiction or not.
Yeah.
So somebody needs to make a book. Maybe I will. I don't know.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
I don't want to ask you to try to teach your entire class to me right
no,
now. But I'm obviously mainly just familiar with like U.S. and British stuff. So what are the characteristics of, like, say, the Philippines? I mean, what kind of science fiction? I mean, is there a different, like, overall theme, or does it read differently? I mean, that's interesting to me.
I think the big themes in science fiction are global. So things that American science fiction writers write about are the same things that Asian science fiction writers write about. Sometimes in different ways, but I think the overall ideas that we're supposed to get from them are pretty similar. I'm trying to think.
I kind of like that. That's helpful and hopeful that there's a global perspective.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole point of science fiction is to go beyond our world. So if we can't be united as a world, how are we ever going to get beyond it? Right?
Yeah. Very cool.
And so I remember you saying something about, like, speaking of it being global, how science fiction is a vehicle to talk about social issues,
all the isms.
Environmental, all the isms. So kind of explain what you mean by that.
Just as a general, very simplified way to explain this, alien science fiction is oftentimes about othering, racism, classism. Science fiction that deals with robots deals a lot with classism. What does it mean to be human? Slavery, like, are we creating these things to be slaves for us? When do they become on the same level as we are, if their brain functions are the same? Almost any science fiction can have to do with sexism. Yeah. And a lot of science fiction is centered around changing gender. One of the most famous I can think of is, and I'm going to blank on the name because I'm on the spot, but Heinlein's All You Zombies. And it's very convoluted about this person who travels in time and changes genders. And I don't want to give away spoilers, but...
Kind of like a shapeshifter?
No, it actually has an operation.
Oh, okay.
But this was, written before it was talked about, right? But this person goes back in time, was born a girl, goes back in time, meets herself after the sex change, falls in love, gets pregnant, and then she, like, births herself. It's just very convoluted, weird. Yeah, but it really makes you sit down and think.
I need a flow chart for
that. Mean? Yeah. So there's a lot of different isms that I talk about with my class every day. We just read a story not too long ago that had to do with immigration and deportation. And it doesn't seem like that when you're first reading it, but then when we start talking about it, then my students go, oh, I get it now. Like, it just seemed like entertaining, but now it's deep.
Yeah.
And I always love that when the light bulbs go on.
That's kind of like the golden egg with literature, right? Yes. That it's entertaining and you're loving it and it's fun, and then later you go, wow, that meant something.
Yeah.
I can relate to that. Cool.
Yeah.
Are we talking about visual as well as written?
Yeah, visual.
Because we were talking about how all of the the classism, sexism, and that sort of thing, and that to me is classic Star Trek. Star Trek is very, and some people don't like it because they think it gets preachy. And I guess if you're trying to explore a topic in a 45-minute show, that it's got to be kind of straightforward. But back in the day, the original Star Trek dealt with a lot of those sorts of issues, and I think all of the more recent iterations have as well. So.
Yeah.
Some of the shows were just for fun, but very often they would deal with, like, what do you call it? When you want to die and people won't let you die,
assisted.
Yeah, the assisted suicide. So like assisted suicide, or in the original series there was a group of aliens where one side of their face was black and the other was white, but then they hated their companions on the world who were white on one side and black on the other. I mean, which was silly, but you know, it made a point in the 60s.
See, I had no idea that correlation of that. I mean, as an activist, or I guess a former activist, I've been kind of out of that world the last few years. Like, that interests me, but I had no idea that was a part of the concept of sci-fi. So when you were watching, because I know, Sharon, you're looking at it from the academics scene and relating that to your students.
Yeah, I am now, but I haven't always. I mean, I've been a sci-fi fan my entire life.
Right.
So
but so I'll ask both of you then, how did you get into sci-fi? Like, what was the draw? Like, what was the first show or movie or book you read that really got you into it, and why did you stay with that genre, the love of that genre?
Honestly, I think the first thing that I read that could even be connected to sci-fi would probably be Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah.
When I was a little kid and read that, and the idea that there was another world, the idea that there was something more than where I was.
Yeah.
And I've gone back and looked at those, and they have a a sort of a Christian underlying theme that I don't really care about, but the idea that there was a different place, that animals could talk, that you could maybe get there and not be in your little town.
How old were you?
Probably 8.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Or an escape from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, not that I had a bad childhood, but still, when you're a kid and you're bored and you're thinking, man, if I open a closet door, I can go somewhere else. I mean, that would be so cool.
Yeah.
But I just,
What about you?
I don't know if I could pinpoint a beginning. I just remember being young and watching Buck Rogers and Space 1999. Back when 1999 was way far away and nobody, we couldn't imagine what would be happening. And
Y2K, oh my god,
yeah. And the original
Y2K.
Battlestar Galactica, just those things. And I was too young to actually remember the episodes from them, but I remember watching them with my dad. Maybe it's a family thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I've always been a huge horror fan. And it was a revelation to me when I realized that horror can fall under speculative fiction. Anything supernatural could be explained scientifically. Those kinds of things. I just love that. So.
Yeah. I think my only connection to science fiction has been through the form of, so I was a huge Monty Python junkie in high school. And so after watching and consuming everything that they did as a troupe, I then, of course, was looking up everything that each individual actor and director did, and so I stumbled across, of course, Terry Gilliam's, his films. So Brazil, Time Bandits. So that's my only connection, and I enjoyed them. I didn't know what was going on at all. And now that I'm an adult, I would kind of like to go back and watch it to get a better idea. But I remember just really, I don't know. I loved anything that was a little counterculture, but I guess I just never really went to the realm of sci-fi. So after reading Narnia, did you continue maybe trying to find books that were similar to that?
I don't remember the process. That's just sort of my earliest memory of something that was not, normal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always loved things that had anything to do with time travel, space travel, your world being skewed and something odd happening, a surprise. You're not expecting the world to be this way.
Is that because, do you feel like that had a tie to you becoming having a career in science?
Maybe. I don't know. A chicken and egg kind of thing. But I think that's just sort of the way my mind works. I think that sort of thing is interesting. I'm less about reading books that are about feelings. Strangely.
Don't care about feelings.
But I want plot and interesting and unexpected.
Yeah. Okay. And so for a person that's saying, okay, I want to get into science fiction, where should they start? Like, what would be science fiction light or 101 to kind of get them into it, get them hooked, and that it's not too intricate, I guess? Like what? I'm looking from a movie or television standpoint, not necessarily literature.
Right. There's so much out there in TV lately that can be coined speculative fiction that you might not even think about, but it is like we said, Black Mirror.
Yeah, that's
Huge.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
one
I
of the huge
loved
ones.
that series.
And honestly, I wouldn't have thought of that as science fiction. It wouldn't have occurred to me. But you're absolutely right. And so I guess the old Twilight Zones.
Twilight Zones, Outer Limits, the newer ones. Every week I watch Lucifer, Supernatural.
Yeah.
I love Supernatural.
Have you seen any episodes of the Orville yet?
I have not yet.
Honestly, I wasn't expecting much. I wasn't expecting much from it. I thought Seth MacFarlane, okay, fine, whatever. But it's a kind of a sweet little love letter to the original Star Trek kind of genre.
Okay.
But it's more like there's just more realistic conversation.
Okay.
So when something happens on the bridge, they're like, "Oh shit," as opposed to phasers away or whatever.
Yeah.
So that might be.
Have you seen the movie Galaxy Quest?
Oh,
now it
God,
came
I
back
love
in 1999, but
Love it.
it is so. It just says so much about everything. It's funny. It's a comedy, and most people come out of it going, "Oh, that was really funny. That was really good." But when you really get down to thinking about things, there's a lot of isms covered. There's a lot of meta thought, like, oh, here's this movie making fun of people making fun of Star Trek. It's just
Do you think
everything?
Do you think somebody who's not already a fan though would enjoy that the way that say we would?
I think they would, because everybody knows about Trekkies,
Yeah.
right? Even if they aren't one, they know about them and they know about the conventions, and so they can find their way into that movie because they're making fun of those people, sort of.
Yeah.
But then it comes back around that
But
maybe not. But
I loved it so much though because it just like it hit every trope, just
it
everything.
did hit every trope, and it's got such a great cast. Like, great.
I'm trying to look it up. What was the movie that Chris Tucker was in? It was the
Fifth Element.
Fifth Element. So
Saw a little bit of it last night actually.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
So does that fall into a similar as Galaxy Quest, or is it different?
It's definitely speculative science fiction, whatever, but it's got some dry comedy to it, but it's not blatantly comedic.
Gotcha.
There's a serious storyline to it.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's really referencing established series like Galaxy Quest was obviously
Gotcha.
referring back to Star Trek, and Fifth Element is not, but it's fun too.
Yeah. Okay. And then there was Mars Attacks.
Oh,
God, that was horrible. That was horrible.
forever ago, too.
Well, I'm trying to get this, so there's these different little genres of sci-fi you mentioned. It felt like in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was this little comedic sci-fi situation going on in pop culture. And so I'm trying to, I don't know.
There's still a lot of that going on, like Zombieland. There's a Norwegian film called Troll Hunter, which I wanted to show to my class, but that's not going to work out this semester, so maybe another time. But on Netflix, there's a crane show called Sniffer, and this guy can just smell everything and he solves crimes that way. So it's like
What about
really
what about
interesting.
Stranger Things? Have you seen that?
Oh yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I think Stranger Things might be a good entry point because it is very, nostalgic for the mid to late 80s. So you would kind of dig that, and it has a Stephen King kind of vibe. So there's a lot of it that it's definitely a speculative fiction. I have a new word, kind of thing. But it also has it has that nostalgia element that people might enjoy.
Yeah.
Well, even things like American Horror Story. I'm watching Hotel because I hadn't been caught up, and I watched Roanoke first, but I'm going back and watching Hotel, and it has to do. There are vampires in that series, but they explain it away as a virus. There's this virus in your blood that makes you never age, and they've made it science fiction.
Okay.
And so there's
like
all kinds of ways into it right now.
Yeah, because the first season, it was Horror House.
Yeah,
right?
Murder House.
Murder House, which that, was probably their most true to horror genre season. And then after that, it kind of, like, did it stay within that genre? Or, like, did it become more of, like, a psychological thriller?
So every season is different.
Yeah.
But the Asylum season, it was definitely science fiction because it had a doctor experimenting on people and creating mutants, and it had aliens in it too. And then the next season was Coven, which had to do with witches. And then
Freak Show,
which would have been great if it had broken up into 2 different seasons. But it was like halfway through the season, the story ended and it started a new one.
Oh, did it?
It seemed like that to me.
Okay.
That's why I didn't watch Hotel until now, because I thought, well, this is just getting weird.
So you like Black Mirror,
Yes.
and do you watch American Horror Story?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you're already a
You're
science
already a
fiction
sci-fi
fan.
fan.
I'm like science fiction light. Like I haven't like my toes are in the water, but not, or I didn't even know my toes were in the water, I guess. But yeah, I mean, yeah, and I watched Stranger Things. It took me about a year. I don't know, for some reason, things that are really popular, I just don't watch. Like I've never seen any
Contrary.
Yeah.
Oh. Like I've never seen Star Wars. I did. Some friends had me watch episode 1 to kind of like start me at the, quote, beginning of the series.
Episode 1, the 4th movie?
Yes, the 4th movie. I know. But I mean, that's all I've seen, and it's been like, 4 years
You need to start with episode 3 and go the way they were made. Maybe even skip 1, 2, and 3.
I know, but I feel like I should have a different experience than everyone else.
Right? Really? You should. You should be unique.
I should be unique.
But you know what I heard when the prequels came out? The reason that they started with A New Hope is because the first 3 were so bad they couldn't get them made into movies.
Oh.
And then it wasn't until everybody fell in love with Star Wars and George Lucas that he went back and made the prequels. And they weren't that good.
Oh, okay.
I've never been a huge Star Wars fan. I mean, I saw them when I was, the first 3 or the, 4, 5, and 6, when I was a kid. But I recently rewatched the very first one that came out, and I couldn't believe how fast it was and how little there was in it. I mean, there was nothing. It was like basically 3 scenes and then we're done. I mean, there was just nothing to it.
As far as plot goes.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of plot, but there were a lot of events. This happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and it just went on and on and on and on.
But after I got to the end of the movie, I was like, wow, that not a whole lot happened there, it seems like.
But are you familiar with, so there's been directors or comedians or actors that have been kind of obsessed with Star Wars. Kevin Smith.
Oh, yeah.
So I was a huge, Kevin Smith fan in high school. That's which is when all of his movies were coming out, Clerks and Mallrats and Dogma and all that stuff. And he would always have
science fiction.
Dogma science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Heck yeah.
Because of
Angels and devils.
Is it
it's been
realistic?
like 20 years since I've seen it.
Is it a realistic thing that could happen when you walk out the door?
No, but I would
That'd
like
be
it
science
to.
fiction.
I do remember wishing, like, man, I wish I could. The Ben Affleck and Matt Damon characters. I was like, man, I wish I could have been that, because so many people need to be called to task. But okay, so
I think that's what science fiction does best, is it makes us wish this were true, so that things could happen. People could there could be revenge, there could be learning, there could whatever, you know.
And growing up, whenever I put the TV on the Sci-Fi channel, it was always to watch Mystery Science Theater,
Which is awesome.
I did love that. But we were kind of, oh God, where were we?
Well, I don't know where we were, but let me go back to, you said maybe a gateway in. Do you watch, there's a new series on ABC called The Good Doctor?
No.
It's not, like, most people wouldn't think it's science fiction, but he is autistic and he has savant syndrome, so he's this genius, but he can't deal with people, and he has a surgical residency, and so he's always solving these medical problems.
So it's like House 2.0, or?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, except he just sees it in his head, and then he says, oh no, we can do this differently, and people are like, that'll never work, and then it always works, but
It always works.
It always works.
Yeah, there's okay. Especially now with the speculative fiction, it opens up the doors to what's possible. So there was a few years ago the rise of, geek culture, right? So where it was being kind of celebrated that, you like these things that maybe as a kid you kind of, watched in your own privacy of your room, or read in your own privacy in your room, and maybe the other kids kind of made fun of you because they were too busy watching like MTV or something. I don't know. And then the rise of popularity of comic books and all that kind of stuff. Like what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I guess I've sort of always felt like the geek, the nerd, and the rise of geek culture is almost irritating because, don't come to the party late.
Talk about mainstreaming yourself. Bandwagoning, right? Yeah. I was someone who played Dungeons and Dragons in the 80s. Not a lot, and now I play regularly, and it took me a while to get back in the swing of things because I didn't play that much, but I played, and so I got blasted for it in school every day.
But it's almost like this, like a coming out of all these closeted geeks.
Well, yeah,
like
now
you did all these things when you were a kid, but you never talked about it because you were trying to uphold this image in school or something.
Except I think there are a lot more people today who say they did those things and didn't really do them because it's cool to be a geek now.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So those of us who actually were,
yes, and
have the battle scars for it
every day for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your draw to Dungeons and Dragons?
I think this is going to sound silly. My characters are always big, tall, muscular men, and I'm a short, not muscular woman. So it's fun to just go in and play that aggressive kind of masculine figure, but everything is dependent on the roll of a dice.
Yeah.
So even though I might have big muscles and great weapons, if I don't roll well, a tiny little thing might beat me.
Gotcha.
So it's sort of that gambler's possibility kind of thing.
Okay.
And that's something that's a problem for me, actually.
Yeah. Well, I loved hearing you say that because I think it comes back around to why do we like to read science fiction? Why do we like to watch science fiction? Because you're looking at possibilities that are not necessarily available to you on a daily basis. So I would love to travel in space. I would love to meet a talking animal. I would love to, travel back in time.
Yes.
All of these things that would be so cool to do. And you're not going to, but why not read about it? Why not watch it? It's freeing.
Okay, speaking of freeing, like from a feminist perspective, what do you feel that science fiction gives women? Like, it sounds like the idea of what's possible, and you said a lot of the things that you've read and watched will tackle sexism, classism, misogyny, that sort of thing. Do you find, and Jennifer, you were talking about was it Star Trek Voyager that had a lot of strong female leads in them? So maybe talk a little bit about as a, something that a woman can watch. Because like in the comic book world, right, Wonder Woman was the only character, at least years ago, that a young girl could like look up to. There was Catwoman. That was kind of weird.
Batgirl. She was always like the third sidekick.
Yeah.
Right?
But with the bad outfit.
Yeah.
But science fiction was
copycat.
Maybe on the forefront of giving these awesome role models to young girls. Maybe, I don't know.
I think that Star Trek Voyager, and it's sort of vilified in the Star Trek community. I think a lot of men who are, Trek fans don't like it. And I think they didn't like it because it had a female captain and a female chief engineer and, all of these sort of like strong female characters. But it really was an ensemble piece. They weren't, it wasn't solely dedicated to the female officers, but they got the storylines, and and your centerpiece, your captain, was female. And I think a lot of women growing up in the 90s, that was late for me, but I think a lot of women in the 90s, that was one of their first, oh, look, here's a girl doing science, here's a girl being strong, here's a girl, making statements,
leading the ship.
And I really like that character, and I love the fact that they never made much of an issue about any of her romantic relationships. They alluded to them here and there, and it was, part of character development along the way, but it wasn't anything like, the Lothario that Captain Kirk was in the original. And the actress, Kate Mulgrew, specifically said, I don't want this to become the central theme of my character. So, my character needs to deal with all of these things that are happening, and a little bit of romance can be part of it, but we're never going to make that be her central theme. And I love that. In the 4th season, I think, of Voyager, they introduced a female character that was a reclaimed Borg, and beautiful actress, tall, blonde, stacked, gorgeous. And it was a piece of eye candy for the fans. I think they were trying to move the series forward. But turns out she was a terrific actress, and it turned into a terrific character. The fact that she was wearing a cat suit every day, was a little bit of red meat for the male fan base. Yeah. But in all, she was still a wonderful actress, and they did really good things for their character.
But even going back before that, things like Terminator, strong female character, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Alien does change the way we make movies about science fiction. Strong female character, right?
How did it change it?
He did things in the movie Alien that had never been done before, and that you will see in a lot of science fiction today, just because it's become the accepted trope or norm, right? But up until the original one, that hadn't been done. It was all new.
Like, what's an example of something that was new?
Well, just allowing a woman to be in a powerful position, allowing her to be in a fight and be hurt, and not just immediately knocked out and killed, but somebody who was fighting and getting bloodied, and continuing to fight. And I think maybe science fiction has because we can have these crazy things. There can be dragons, there can be talking animals, there can be whatever. That a powerful woman is a possibility.
Hey, what a concept.
Seriously. And so it's allowed for exploring that.
Yeah.
But I think Alien changed the idea of the final girl. How we watch horror movies and the one girl survives because she's the innocent virgin, and she just like figures out how to survive. With Ripley and Alien, she fought to survive. She didn't just happen to be the last one alive. She knew what was going on. if everybody would have listened to her at the very beginning when they were coming back from their exploration and she wanted to not let them in, the movie would have never been made, because she would have said, you can't come in, it's protocol. And they were like, well, you can't do this. And
Hey, y'all, listen to the smart woman.
yeah, she knew what she was talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's one thing. I don't really dig horror very much, and that's one of the horror tropes that really kind of bothers me, because it's always the quote unquote slutty girl who dies
first.
because they have to pay, and it's always the virginal girl that lives, and that just that's an ugly that's an ugly pattern.
Ugh. So I kind of want. I don't know. I want to go back to black magic. I want to go back to
Black Mirror.
have some more wine.
Yeah.
the black magic woman. Black Mirror. And so watching that series, so now realizing that was science fiction, speculative fiction.
So I would venture to say Black Mirror is hard science fiction, because it takes technologies we have today and extrapolates what might happen. So
Okay, so can we talk about how it did
how it
happen? So, I guess it was maybe earlier this year, probably the beginning of the year, I started watching Black Mirror. So I was told, it's been brought to Netflix, but if you click on it on Netflix, it automatically takes you to the 3rd season, because that's when Netflix took over. But there's obviously 2 seasons prior that was done on one of the BBC channels. And so it's like, make sure that you go back to the beginning to get a base for the series. And watching those seasons and seeing that it was 2011 was the first season, and seeing how some of those plot lines came into fruition, really, really blew my mind, and it was freaking me out, because it was like right after the election I was watching it. Maybe that's what was going on. I was like, holy shit, that just happened.
And then there's the one with Cartoon Bear.
Yes, it was that episode that I was like, oh God.
It was prophetic, right?
So, I mean, I know that when people describe Black Mirror, they always say it's like, it's like present day Twilight Zone. I didn't really watch the Twilight Zone. Did you?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Loved it.
So did you?
Of course.
in the same realm that Black Mirror, some of the things that they, projected came true. Did you see a lot of that happen with Twilight Zone?
I don't think so, because Black Mirror is specifically looking, as if I'm remembering correctly, specifically looking at technology, really, and how technology affects our lives. And all of that's changing so quickly right now that I think that's why it feels very creepy.
Yeah.
Well, Black Mirror is about screens. That's why it's called Black Mirror, because it's like an empty screen that reflects ourselves back to us. Culture reflects who we are.
Nice face does.
Right? So that's Black Mirror has a lot to do with that sort of technology. And I always have to be careful using the word technology, because when people say sci-fi, they think this one thing. When people say technology, they think this one thing. But technology can go back to the ancient Greeks when they started writing, right? So it just depends on what you mean by technology.
Technology was the first wheel.
Yeah. But when you think about some of the first seasons of Twilight Zone, they were talking about getting in a spaceship and going to other planets. And this was 10 years before we went to the moon.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's actually a documentary called How Star Trek Changed the World. And it talks about all of their idealized science technology that has come to be. 2001 was supposedly the creation of the iPad, right? They had that little screen. And
wow, it was a 1?
2001.
It was a precursor to the iPod?
2001 came out in late 70s?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Right.
There's
The movie 2001: A Space
Sorry.
Odyssey. Yeah.
But so many things, yeah. And I've wondered, though, that I know the thing that you're referring to, where it says, precursor to. But so Do you think their little communicators, their little flip phones that they had, do you think the people who created flip phones were Star Trek fans? And would like, man, wouldn't it be cool to have one of those, and did that? Or is it just something that happened naturally and we just, we created flip phones because...
Quite possibly,
So,
because phones weren't
know.
flipped.
There's probably a lot of variables, but when you think about the stereotype of the geek from the 70s and 80s, they a lot of times went into the technology field, so they probably were fans, and they didn't necessarily create it because of Star Trek, but that idea
why
was
not? It was in
planted in
their
their head, right?
See, this is a whole time travel thing for me right here.
Yeah.
So...
watching the Minority Report, that movie that came out early 2000s, right? And so seeing this, I remember being blown away by seeing the Tom Cruise character touching these screens and all these things moving around, and then now that's our life. With iPads, with Promethean boards in schools, like that's just a thing that we do now, but it was so, far in the future feeling when we watched it, and then a few years later, thank you, Apple. It's a thing now.
If you can dream it, you can make it happen.
If you can dream it, be it. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I was really taken aback in a way by technology, right? We're all kind of a slave to it, which I love, having this information in the palm of my hand. But then there's also the downside of it, where you're constantly on your phone, or I'm thankful for it when I'm in the grocery line and the line is long, because I've got like a full cart and I can't just go through the express lane, and I'm waiting, and so I'm thankful that I could just whip out my phone and scroll through something or play a game real quick, and I'm not as agitated having to wait as maybe I would have been 10-15 years ago.
I'm wondering if 10 or 15 years ago, I would not have been as agitated because I had more of a sense of patience, and I had more, focus. I think my ability to focus and think deeply is decreasing.
We're the worst. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I'd be careful. Number one, before we had the phone stuff about, they sold a lot of tabloids.
Yeah.
People were distracted very easily.
Yeah.
And I don't think technology is making us think less. I think it's making us think in a different way. It's changing the way our brains work and the way we process information. But I don't think it's making us dumber, and that's a huge controversy.
Maybe
right?
It's generational.
And I just want to go back. You can't really knock technology when we're doing a podcast. I mean, you got to be thankful for technology
and point to you.
I would. Yeah, I would never knock technology because, I mean, I obviously have loved it since the get-go. But I'm more kind of talking about us as humans. Like as far as our being able to display humanness, I guess has become lacking because of it.
But haven't you ever seen the meme on Facebook where the top picture is a bunch of people sitting around looking at their phones, and it's saying, "Oh, for the good old days," and then it shows this older picture of everybody sitting around reading newspapers. We weren't interacting anymore back then than we are now. We're interacting in a different way because we now can be in touch with anybody around the world just like that.
I don't know. I beg to differ because so my early years of college, which was like pre-texting day, so no one was ever really checking their phone all the time like that. We'd go out to dinner, like if it was someone's birthday. Like I'm distinctly when you said something about like before the phones, it was newspapers and all that stuff. So maybe it's a generational thing. And so I remember being out to dinner at O'Charlers or something like that, and we were all just kind of sitting around the table, and I'm guessing talking to each other. I don't think we were talking about anything of substance. But we were engaging with each other. So I think it has changed the way that it's almost like this default, like this defense mechanism, right? So you're sitting, you go to the restaurant or you go to the bar to meet your friend. They're late. So you pull up a seat at the bar, and then what's the first thing you do?
Pull out your phone.
Mm-hmm. so that you don't feel awkward and sit and like, and although, you know, if it's your place, your watering hole, and you go there all the time, you will probably talk to other people. But it's an effort to try to just engage with the next person, because it's like, why? You know, because we don't do that anymore.
Yeah. I agree with you that in a way it's making us more connected, because I'm definitely in touch with people on Facebook that I would not be at all if it required a phone call or a letter. It wouldn't happen.
You're dead to me.
Pretty much, yeah. Because I can't get to you in 3 seconds. I'm done. Yeah. So in a way, I do feel very more connected like that. But I feel like my personal ability to focus, my attention span is less than it used to be. I'm not comfortable standing in a grocery line for 2 minutes.
God forbid 2 minutes.
Yes, seriously, 2 minutes. You know, whereas before I would, you know, glance at the National Enquirer or look at the candy selection or, you know, something. I just feel like I'm
different than looking at your phone. Like, it's a distraction. Looking at what's in the candy and looking what's on tabloid and thinking
it is, but I feel like I almost feel like it's an almost an addictive sort of thing, that if I don't check my phone regularly,
it's a tick.
Yeah,
you know, it's almost like you feel any kind of activity. Like, I keep, you know, my phone in my pocket. You feel any kind of activity near your, like, you're like, is that a vibration? I don't know what that is. I don't know. And
yeah, like phantom vibration. But you know, I've read studies on this, and they've said we've always had those. We just notice them now because we're trying to pay attention to whether our phones are vibrating.
We've had phantom vibrations before.
Yeah, like those are just our muscles. They're twitching and electricity.
But there's nothing to grab.
Coursing through. Well, we don't notice it. We never noticed it before because there was no reason. Now there's a phone that might be vibrating, so we have to check.
Like, nothing. So then, what was that?
Yeah, that's just our bodies, right?
But no, I agree. As far as it being this connector, because it was, you know, when you move away or friends move away, it's kind of the one way that you do keep in touch. Because we don't write letters to each other anymore. You know, we barely email each other anymore now. Like, it's Facebook Messenger. I remember back in the day, it was so sad to see the end of AOL Instant Messenger saying, I was like, memories of instant messaging strangers ASL, age, sex, location. Yeah. Hey, you know, like the original like hookup situation. So it's been fun to see. I love being a part of that. I'm on that cusp of technology generations where I, you know, was around before there was this whole big internet sensation and, you know, the connectivity of messaging folks, but then like being able to see today, I love the watching that arc. And then I love kind of just sharing with, you know, friends that are from that same generation of like, oh, remember when waiting for your dial-up, as compared to, you know, kids today. Like, if you look at yourself today, if you were on your computer and it takes half a second for a page to load, you're freaking out. Because
refresh. What's going on?
Why isn't this page loading? Whereas back in the day, you'd have to wait about 5 minutes just to, you know, for your AOL to connect to your modem, and that little running man, like, you got mail, you know.
Or God forbid, you needed a piece of information and there was no internet and you had to go flip and look it up in a library from a card catalog. I mean, seriously, I am absolutely unable to go without an answer for more than 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Ask me a question. I'm not going to sit and try to figure it out. I need it. I need it right now.
I need the answer right now.
But I have to say, I love it in class, especially some of the kids that I teach, and they ask really good questions. I'm like, you know what? I have no idea. Let's find out. And then tappity tap and throw it up on the Promethean board. Here's our answer.
But see, isn't that more freeing? Like, before we had that ability as teachers, we weren't allowed to say, I don't know.
No, I kind of always said I don't know. So I'll find out for you later, but it might take me a couple of days to figure it out. But no, I do love that. I find that that's brilliant. I mean, that's absolutely brilliant. I guess my issue is not the way we use it in society. It's me personally. I feel like I don't have the power of concentration because I'm multitasking too often, and that's a personal failing.
Yeah, same.
But back to what you were saying about going out to dinner and talking with your friends. Number one, it's so much easier to get an invitation to go out now.
Yes,
True that.
Yes.
I did get married right out of high school. I didn't go to college right away, but I don't remember hanging out with people from college because we didn't have that connection. And if I were going to a bar to meet someone, I'd had a book with me or homework or something.
Yeah.
So even though it's a phone now, I always had some sort of, just being a woman, I always had some sort of barrier.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. From some predatorial person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's why I'm a big proponent. I know there's like all these think pieces about how social media is making us feel more and more alone and less connected, which for me, it's the exact opposite.
Me too. Yeah.
So maybe I don't know. So those think pieces are having to do more with the idea of watching friends and then being envious of maybe their lives because you're getting a highlight reel when you're on social media. You're posting the good pictures.
You're getting the curated version.
Yeah, curated version. You're not posting that fight you just had, with your significant other. You're not.
Well, some of us do. Damn.
This person is an asshole.
So, okay, how would you handle this situation?
I'm really irritated.
Yeah.
And then it's like, see, and then you tag your person, like, see, this is how they went. But yeah, you're right. Like, I stay on as much as the times that I kind of want to get away from Facebook just because some of it's toxic. Like when the whole Charlottesville blast was going on, where it's like, I'm just seeing swastikas and racism and Nazis like on my timeline, like 24/7 here. Let me,
Step away.
let me take a step away. But then also I was, there's also that, fear of missing out. In the sense of like, I like to keep Facebook so that I can stay abreast of events and what's going on and like, oh, so-and-so's having a party or we're going to go over here. Like that, or even if just like someone, I remember, I don't do it as much anymore, but you kind of post like, hey, who patio? Question mark, drinks, happy hour,
Yes.
hello,
Emoji. Yes.
Well, we're going to miss the entire hashtag Me Too. Right? It actually was started 10 years ago, but it only became viral now.
Yeah. But a lot of things have only become viral now because of the, so many more people are on social media than they were before. So it was really hard for anything. I remember most, I've been on Facebook since the very beginning. Like I first got on, I think in 04 or 5 or whatever, when it was the Facebook, and it was just kind of like a little it was nothing. There's no I remember when the news feed started and I was like, ooh, girl.
You had to be associated with a school to be on it.
Yeah, you had to be associated with the university. You had to have your university, and it took a couple of days for you to get validated. Anyways, but I remember trying, like when I was traveling and I want to check out what this new city has to offer, I would always go to a couple of different establishments, Facebook pages to see if they had events, and there was nothing. It was crickets, it was tumbleweeds everywhere. Because I wanted to see like what's going on. But like in recent years that's changed, that everybody is going there to post, their concerts, their events, their parties, their gatherings, like it's all there. And
it's a primary means of communication.
And so I use it as my social calendar. I will say maybe or interested in something just so that I can kind of have it on my calendar when I'm planning something for later. Like, so if someone's like, hey, let's go do this thing, it's like, well, I might go to that concert. But yeah, for that reason, I feel more connected to people than I ever would be had it not existed.
Agreed.
Okay.
And it might never existed if we didn't have Mother from Alien. Right? The whole idea of a network and being connected.
Bringing it full circle.
That's what I do. I'm a teacher.
And bring it back.
because it's going to be a couple of weeks from now from when this airs. So, like, talking about the Me Too and the Harvey Weinstein stuff will be a little dated by then. So I'm trying to talk about it in a more generic way.
Everything happens so fast right now. This fucking dumpster fire of a country that we're living in. There's no way it's not going to be dated in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
So, okay. Here's something that I've been kind of, I guess, thinking about. And it's this sense of, I don't know, Facebook or social media activism, right? And so just because you post something about something, that means you are actively doing something about it. In reality, you aren't. So you think about what's been going on these last several weeks with, the shootings in Las Vegas, all of the wildfires that are going on in California, what's going on with finally more people are talking about, sexual assault against women and, being vocal about it. And, allegedly men are going to, step up their game and actually, say something if their buddies are doing it. But so it's one thing to post like, oh, I'm an ally and I'm totally going to do it.
I support Puerto Rico.
I support Puerto Rico. And prayers for so and so, which, okay, like this isn't a Christian bashing thing. It's more okay, if you are really actively wanting to do something for a community, then do it. These people need water, need necessities. They don't necessarily need prayers. Like but then you also kind of feel helpless in a situation like with California, the wildfires. It's like, I mean, they're busy. They were busy still trying to put the fires out, let alone, get, help from folks that were affected by the fire. But I guess I'm just I just get so tired of seeing all these posts about, and I guess it's been a joke on a couple of different series where they like a hashtag thoughts and prayers. They're talking about how
lots of memes about that.
Lots of memes about thoughts and prayers.
The first truck full of thoughts and prayers has shown up, and it's an empty truck, right?
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for
we're gonna drink those right now.
Right. This is so nourishing. Your thoughts and prayers. Cool. So yeah, I'm just, unless you're actually posting about something that you're gonna do, then I don't know. Just I don't know, shut up. I guess just don't post.
In some of my comp classes, and some of the readers I've had, there have been articles about that, and they call it slacktivism.
Yes.
Instead of activism.
I love that.
People will post something or like something that someone else has posted and think they've done their part instead of actually getting up and doing their part.
Yep.
On the other hand, before this widespread social media, we probably wouldn't have heard about half of these things.
True.
True.
There is, I think, benefit. There's something good that comes out of, like, signal boosting. Let's put it out there, and maybe somebody who wouldn't have noticed would notice your post.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate people who, let's say, instead of saying thoughts and prayers for the hurricane victims, who will post a link to, this is an easy way to donate.
Yep.
So if you can post something that actually has a link to an action, that seems more helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah, I'm all about action in all aspects of life. Like I don't like to just talk about things just to talk about them. I want to, if it's something that we're tackling, I want to put forth actual energy to it. Something that we can do, whether it is, hey, this quick link, or I can text this number and send $20 to whoever. But then also there's that whole thing with, because I almost said text the Red Cross, but also they're problematic, right. And the majority of the money don't even make it to the victims. And so those are the things you kind of have to watch out for.
Yeah, and not put something out that is going to be ineffective. And
yes,
like the big thing now, I donate my birthday. On Facebook, everybody's donating their birthdays, and you donate money, and it goes to some cause.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like, where is it actually going?
Yeah, how well vetted are those causes?
Like, is it going to the big conglomerates? Like, I'm very wary of a link to a Red Cross, a United Way, an HRC.
Well, but those things, you have to vet your sources that way, in the same way that you do your news. You know,
Yes.
you don't post an article that is not a legitimate news source. So you have to take some responsibility for the information that you put out.
Yeah, but we see how often people don't do that
Yeah,
with their
I know.
news. So I wonder
Yeah.
how
Well,
often they're
but-
doing it with their links.
It's like, well, let's learn from that.
yes.
Well,
Yeah.
it's kind of all on you as an individual to, you know.
But on
to
the
do
other
that.
hand, if 100 people were posting bad links and we talk about it and one person is posting one link and 99 are posting bad link, at least we made some sort of difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
But yeah, that is our show. And thank you so much, Jennifer.
This was fun. Thank you.
Sharon.
Yeah, I could talk about sci-fi for another 4 hours.
We kind of veered off of the sci-fi, but
Yeah,
we-
I could.
we'll totally hook you up with some movies to watch and books to read.
I was going to send you a couple short stories, but I didn't get around to it.
Yeah, please do. And if you're listening, please, go to iTunes, give us a 5-star rating to kind of, help us get out there and get us onto other platforms and reach other folks so that they can listen and enjoy it as well. And if you have any show topics or, things that you would like to hear about, or any questions or anything like that, just, shoot me an email at coupleoflindas@gmail.com. And I'll get back to you and maybe even, I don't know, talk about it on the show or have you on the show depending on how close you are. But again, thank you, and we'll see you next time on A Couple of Lindas.